Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Dr. Bakari K. Lumumba of LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black. Back once again, in conjunction with Beacon Network, the Pan African social media extraordinaire, and the home of African centered news and information. And we're back once again, family. And we're going to have a rather important conversation, but one that, of course, is rather somber. We're going to be discussing, of course, the tragic case of Jason Arday. Many of you, I think, would be aware of course, the brother who was the Cambridge professor who was found deceased. Last week, he was the center of a firestorm about race and hiring, of course, issues that we, of course, we will address later in the live, but want to make sure that you all do, first and foremost, hit the like and subscribe button, thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, hit the notification bell as well, hit the hype button as well. So one of the things, of course, in this show really is going to be for our brothers and sisters in the UK. We know we have a number of subscribers from the UK, Mr. K from the UK, snapshot reviews, etc. And so we're going to be just talking about, of course, Cambridge University. And so, in fact, I'm going to read an article from the New York Times, if I can bring it up here, where we're going to discuss this issue. But put a 1 in the chat if you're familiar with this case. But Brother Arday, Dr. Arday, just for some respect on his name, put a 2 in the chat if you are unfamiliar with, of course, Dr. Jason Arday. Of course, he was a former department chair, if I remember correctly, at Cambridge University. So once again, family, put a 1 in the chat if you're familiar with him and his story. Put a 2 in the chat if you're unfamiliar. And then we, of course, get the conversation started. Thumbs up, thumbs up. Make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Of course, you're watching LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black empowerment initiative where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black, in conjunction, of course, with Beacon Network, the Pan African social media extraordinaire, and the home concerted news and information. And so, I think this is the case for a number of reasons. One, anyone who's familiar with the academy knows that because one of the arguments that was being made is that he maybe falsified, right, some of his credentials or backstory, so on and so forth. But we're really going to get into that. But family, I want you all to, and of course the link is in the description. The link is in the chat, so that's not an issue of concern. But we're talking about whether he has Black Androcide come to the academy. Many of you may be familiar with the concept of Black Androcide. This is systematic, of course, deletion of Black boys and Black men. We find this in a number of ways, and of course, in civil society. Some people call it maybe uncivil society, right? But has this come to the academy? And we're going to break down why. Many would argue that it's already come to the academy, and the Black Androcide may not be in terms of a physical deletion, but oftentimes in terms of a deletion in terms of one's presence or numbers or access to, of course, the academy or being in the academy, right? We know that there's a lot of research on this concept and idea of Black men not being in the academy that we find. So definitely want to get to that and have that conversation. But before we do, I just want to make sure that you all are familiar with the case. Once again, if you could put a 1 in the chat. If you're familiar, put a 2 in the chat if you're unfamiliar. This has kind of really been in the mainstream media. But we're really going to break down why this is of particular importance in a moment. I'm trying to take, I'm saying New York Times is giving me some problems. I want to make sure I'm able to read this article for you all. Let's see here if I can bring it up, and then we could get started. And of course, the link's in the description. The link will be put in the chat momentarily, and then we can move forward, have a productive conversation, not only this Dr. Arday, but also relation to Black Androcide in the academy. So once again, if you're watching on Make sure you hit, of course, the like button, hit share as well. And then, of course, you can over here to Lumumba Speaks on YouTube. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to read this article and then we can get the conversation started. So this is, of course, per the New York Times. So we hear a tragic story of Jason Arday, the Cambridge professor found dead last week, was at the center of a firestorm about racing hiring. We talked to a reporter covering her story. If ever a story seemed tailor-made to pour fuel on the culture war fires, it was the tragic story of Jason Arday. The Cambridge professor recently resigned under scrutiny and was found deceased last week in a South London home. His story touches on a deeply divisive topics, from race to higher education to DEI to autism. There's so much to unpack to make sense of it all. Of course, I spoke with colleague Mara Hembistendahl, who's been reporting on Arday's life and his death and the fallout at Cambridge. And so 3 years ago, Jason Arday was hired as a professor at Cambridge University. Cambridge made a big deal of his new star, touting him as its youngest Black professor, promoting his incredible personal story of growing up in public housing and overcoming severe development ways to go on to academia. Then last month, a blog post written by a former Cambridge researcher, once disciplined after arguing Black people couldn't succeed in the meritocracy, accused Arday of plagiarism and embellishing his life story. A firestorm ensued. British media, especially British conservative media, found the story irresistible. Eventually, Arday resigned, saying he no longer wished to feel as if he was living under a constant spotlight. Last week, he was found dead in a London apartment. In a statement, his family referenced the campaign of sustained abuse he endured. So Arday, of course, was hired for an enormously prestigious position and established chair of education in 2023. At the time, Cambridge was under a lot of pressure to representation of people of color, both among faculty members and students. And you really cannot overstate how far they had to go. Cambridge was and is a very white place. Arday had a PhD in education, but only a modest publication record. He'd been bouncing from one university to another. We know that among the people competing with Arday for the position were two more experienced women of color. But Arday was the only Black applicant. He also had his backstory of being diagnosed early with autism, not speaking until very late, and overcoming that to make a name for himself. And Cambridge was promoting that too. Part of the issue here is that universities increasingly want to hire stars who have amazing personal stories and big followings that can gain the institution positive media coverage. So some of the issues here, with some people have made the argument that quite possibly Cambridge University set him up, right? Particularly if you're going to be the department chair at a university, particularly a prestigious institution, you're typically going to be a full professor. You're going to be a senior professor, and you're going to have a very impressive publication record. Of course, he had a modest publication record, and I don't believe that he was a full professor. As I said, he was bouncing from university to university. And so some would argue that maybe they kind of set him up because he hadn't really, I guess, what's the word that you made his bones, right? He wasn't a made man yet in the academy to be a department chair, right? And so those are some issues. Some argue that he was pushed to and possibly delete himself due to intense media pressure. But there was a lot of information highlighted that some of the claims he made about his person, about his story, were false. So when Cambridge first found out about potential problems with Arday's work, it says almost immediately, Cambridge was first alerted to possible plagiarism 3 months after he was hired. They didn't deal with these allegations swiftly, which isn't unusual. What is unusual is how actively they defended Arday. They said he was facing several issues at the time he wrote those papers that influenced his work, including direct and indirect racism. Cambridge then got alerted by a very respected academic industry publication to issues in Arday's doctoral thesis. Over here, of course, we call it a dissertation here in the good old US of A. He continued to defend him, saying at one point that he was the victim of a game. So these latest allegations didn't come out of nowhere. They've been circulating inside Cambridge for 3 years. Cambridge could have easily done its own investigation, but it didn't. So there's a couple of issues here, right? Typically, your dissertation committee do a thorough review, right, of your dissertation, or of course in the UK they call it a thesis, to make sure that there is no plagiarism. They do use Turnitin, etc. But I also know, and this is someone who, of course, carries the terminal degree, that there's immense pressure when you are in doctoral programs to produce, right? The expectation is that when you enter into a doctoral program or PhD program, you go from being a knowledge consumer to a knowledge producer. And so there's intense pressure that you're publishing almost at the same rate as your professors, right? There's intense pressure that you're producing knowledge, that you are speaking and presenting at conferences, etc., right? That your name known in the academy. So as a result of that, there's a lot of pressure, and this is where a lot of these issues, oftentimes, of plagiarism comes from, right? Then there's a push to be the next hot shot. But be that as it may, Cambridge supported him through these allegations. Other professors, my colleagues and I spoke to, was that this was a position that typically goes to people who are very senior, correct, as I stated before, by thrusting Arday into that position pretty early in his career and by heavily promoting his personal story with all of its, they argue, the university set him up for intense scrutiny and ultimately for failure. That's not to say that he wasn't pushing these things, but without the Cambridge brand, without the extensive media coverage, the story may have looked very, and arguably, had Cambridge dealt with it earlier, this would not have all blown up and it's very public and tragic. So don't know. So this is an issue. Mental health plays a role as well. We know oftentimes, unfortunately, in the academy, individuals are holding, of course, to the opinions of the colleagues, right? When you're going up for tenure, that one of the metrics that they use when you're going up for tenure is the concept of collegiality, right? Do you get along with your colleagues very well? And oftentimes those colleagues are older and extremely conservative, right? And so oftentimes to do that, you may have to find yourself aligning with or agreeing with perspectives that you may find antithetical to your existence. But it even publishing is on topics or making arguments that in your published works that you disagree with, right? And many people call this publish and perish if you do not write to the audience or to the masses who are, of course, co-signing to be a member of the academy. So we have a lot to unpack here, family. Has Black Androcide come to the academy? Many people argue about this concept of pushing Black males out of the academy. So the link is in the description. I'm gonna put the link in the chat. We'd love to hear from you all regarding this issue. We're discussing, of course, we're examining the passing of Jason Arday. Has Black Androcide come to the academy? So the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Want to hear from you all, well, particularly brothers and sisters from the UK. We know that the Cambridge is an elite institution of higher education. We also know that Cambridge is known for being very white, culturally, even smug. So definitely want to hear from you all there. But once again, we want to examine, right, the story, the backstory. There were some flaws, some arguments made that some of the stories, some of the claims that he made were false in terms of being nonverbal till he was age 11, not learning how to read until he was 18. Then, of course, having a meteoric rise, particularly academically, when he's able to, of course, gain a PhD. And then, of course, the rest, as they say, is history. And then landed, of course, an illustrious prestigious position at, of course, Cambridge University. Individuals who was really championing, attacking, of course, his backstory was an individual who not only stated that Black people could not succeed in the meritocracy, but that Black people were just naturally intellectually inferior to whites. And so we see that there was racism that was pushing this. And that oftentimes, when you have a position of power, prestige, or even influence, them folks tend to take extreme umbrage with that and would oftentimes do whatever they can, particularly in terms of microaggressions, but maybe oftentimes even in terms of violence, to try to remove one from said position. So we're looking at maybe an issue of white fragility here. But of course, as we know, he resigned due to intense media pressure. I think this is something he could overcome. But now we find, of course, he's no longer with us. We don't know if it was foul play. Some people are suggesting that maybe he, of course, chose to delete himself. So there's a conversation regarding, of course, mental health that will need to take place as well. But once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. If you're watching on Twitter, I will put the link in the comments so that you can tap in and be part of the conversation as well. And then we're doing this show because there was a brother who actually commented on a previous post that he wanted to, of course, wanted me to do a show on this particular subject matter and kind of get my thoughts, right? And so we talk about Black Androcide, right? It may not always a situation in which, of course, someone's been deleted. Part of it is simply, focusing on removing Black men from certain spaces, right? So that's academia, that's positions of influence, right? Dr. T.S. Johnson is one of the preeminent Black male scholars, and he talks about anti-Black misandry. In fact, if you haven't gotten this book, Solutions to Anti-Black Misandry, make sure you do that. But he talks about these type of issues. And so when we look at, of course, this concept of androcide, it may not be a physical deletion, even though, of course, Brother Arday is no longer with us, but oftentimes it can even be a social deletion, right? You're removed from particular spaces because your presence is seen as problematic, or actually be seen as problematic, or a actual hindrance to the forward progress of said civil society. So once again, family, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. I'd love for you all to tap in, be part of the conversation. Another quick thing, the brother actually was Ghanaian, so his parents were Ghanaian. So this was a brother who, of course, had roots with the continent, ties to the continent, more direct ties, even though we all have ties but once again, link is in the description, link is in the chat. We'd love to hear from you all in terms of what are your thoughts, right? Do you think he shouldn't have maybe embellished, right, his backstory? What are your thoughts on the university putting that typically senior academics are up for? He was a junior academic, a junior scholar. And then what are your thoughts on, of course, the push or the rancor regarding his backstory by individuals who, of course, have a history of course, anti-Black racism? So the link is in the description, link is in the chat. If you're watching on Twitter, I put the link in the comments under the video so you could tap in as well. We'd love to hear from you all. You're watching LumumbaSpeaks.com, a Black Empowerment Initiative where we can gain competitive advantage by always betting on Black, in conjunction, of course, with Beacon Network, the Pan-African Social Media Extraordinaire, in the home of African Center News and Information. So make sure you hit the like, thumbs up button, like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell, and make sure you hit the super chat as well and be a blessing, of course, to the show. So once again, family, examining the death of Jason Arday, Black academic at Columbia University, who, of course, unfortunately is no longer with us, no longer with us. So yes, so he resigned under scrutiny, and then of course he was found dead. He was even accused of plagiarism, which is really something because when I was in my doctoral program, what we were always taught is cite, but when in doubt, cite, right? Cite yourself, source, cite your source, cite your source. So, and I think I probably had 25 pages worth of citations in my dissertation. So, excuse me. So yeah, I don't know what those accusations in detail were, but what I do know is that he was accused of plagiarism, which is a major issue in academia, right? If anybody has gone to college, if you are accused of plagiarism or found guilty of plagiarism, you get an F right there, and oftentimes you even fail the course, fail the class, not just the assignment. So plagiarism is a major issue in the academy. So you definitely don't want to be accused of that. And it could be career ending, right? If they find out that you wrote something and that you are engaged in plagiarism, it can oftentimes end your career. You can find yourself outside of the academy. So major issue there. We don't know if this was a situation where there was so much pressure. We know the family believes that there's pressure, and that is why they believe that he made a decision to possibly delete himself. So something to consider. We definitely want to make sure that anyone is dealing with these type of issues, you reach out to a mental health specialist. If you have a mentor, a community that could support you, we definitely want you to do that. We don't want you to make a permanent decision based on a temporary situation. So, but once again, the link's in the description. The link is in the chat. Hopefully, brother Sandman from Philly, but Mr. K from the UK, and of course, Snapshot Reviews. These are all brothers who typically frequently tap in, could be part of the conversation because they're in the UK, with the exception of Mr. Sandman, and we can have a robust conversation regarding, of course, brother Jason Arday. But my position is that yes, Black Androcide has come to the academy, what some people know as called push out, right? And this is for a number of issues. We know Dr. C.S.R. Johnson typically fixates on or focuses on the gynocracy, the gynocratic perspective or role in the removal of Black men from the academy, particularly Black gynocracy. But this is a situation that isn't rooted in the gynocracy, but particularly anti-Black misandry, right? Particularly coming from a right frame of reference. So my hope and desire is that we can have a productive conversation this afternoon or evening based on where you are in the world. So once again, the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Tap in and be part of the conversation. You're watching on themoviementspeaks.com, the Black Empowerment Initiative, where we believe we could gain a competitive advantage by always betting on Black, in conjunction with Equaline Network, the Pan-African social media extraordinaire, in the home of African-centered news and information. So tap in, family. The link is in the description. The link is in the chat. I'm just kind of reviewing right now another article. Of course, they say the death is being treated as unexpected, but was not believed to be suspicious. So there's something to consider here. Of course, he was an established chair of education at the school's Jesus College. He had written and lectured on racism in higher education. But of course, yes, he wrote in his memoir that he could not speak until age 11 and could not read until age 18, charting a remarkable trajectory from nonverbal preteen to PhD. But of course, last month, a public firestorm over Mr. Arday's career erupted after a blog post accused him of plagiarism in his dissertation and embellishing his personal story. It was written by a scholar known for work suggesting that Black people were genetically predisposed to be less intelligent than white people. Scrutiny intensified ahead of the publication of Mr. Arday's memoir on Tuesday by Simon & Schuster, as journalists found more inconsistencies in his story. He resigned from Cambridge last week. Allegations about Mr. Arday's work circulated within Cambridge for years, but the institution disregarded repeated warnings about possible duplication of Mr. Arday's work, according to the academic integrity site Retraction Watch. The lead university initially defended Mr. Arday, but in a letter sent to faculty on Tuesday, promised an independent investigation of his hiring and called the case an aberration and troubling. Others signed an open letter questioning the university's handling of the allegations and criticized it for crafting a media narrative focused on his youth, his race, and his transformative potential. So something to consider there. So I think, like I said, maybe the institution did this because they felt that they would be benefit for them, right? So it says Times analysis finds impossible data in his work. Academic research by the former Cambridge professor is littered with inconsistencies, false funding claims, and let's see here, false funding claims, and okay, I can't see the rest. So it's rather unfortunate. Big Ross, I'm doing quite all right. How are you? Hopefully you could tap in. Are you familiar with this situation? Love to hear from you, but extremely unfortunate. We know that everyone deals with pressure in the workplace, right? Just extremely unfortunate that this is a situation in which it led to him decision to no longer be with us. And as it appears, right, we don't know if that is actually the case, but it appears that he chose to, of course, delete himself. So extremely unfortunate, but once again, I'm not familiar with the case at all. Okay, understood. Yeah, so just very, very, very unfortunate situation, but my thoughts are this could be an example. The attacks on him could be an example of Black Androcide. The reason why I say that is there have been a number of cases where individuals who are, of course, of European descent have engaged in questionable tactics, practices, research, and even behavior in the academy. And not only do they typically keep their job, or they can transfer immediately to another prestigious institution and oftentimes get a pay raise. I can recall vividly learning of a story about when I was in my doctoral program about a white woman, I believe, who was at Princeton, and she was engaging in behavior that was tantamount to sexual harassment of her graduate assistants. And she was able to resign and get a job paying even more at Rutgers, right? So I was like, what the French told. So I think there may be, of course, a racial issue here, where, of course, had issue with his youth, his gravitas, his charisma, and wanted to see him, of course, no longer at the institution. But I think it's very extremely troubling that it led to him, of course, deleting himself, right? And he may have embellished because he believed that he lacked the actual requisite credentials needed and necessary to, of course, be at an institution like Cambridge, and of course even be a department chair. Rather extremely unfortunate, but I think maybe this could be a lesson for all of us. But I think the major issue that we could really focus on is this concept of social deletion, right? Black androcide, of course, in the academy, of removing Black men really from being functional members of society. Some of that takes place through the carceral state that many of us are aware of, but it takes place in other ways as well, where individuals typically have an issue with Black maleness, right? So this is something, of course, that Dr. C.S.I. Johnson talks about. His research really, of course, speaks to. But this very, very sad situation for the brother who's no longer with us. Of course, my thoughts go out to his family. But I also hope that we could take this as a lesson, right? Something that we can really learn from. But Paul Robeson stated, "The battlefront is everywhere. There is no sheltered rear." I think we have to be cognizant of, irrespective of where we are, what work we're doing, what industry we're working in, we are under attack, and so we have to make sure that we're doing the work, particularly in terms of in the mental space, psychologically, so that we're well, and we don't resort to self-harm as an escape from, of course, the omnipresent role of anti-Black racism. So. Once again, the link is in the description, the link's in the chat. Big Ross, if you want to discuss Black androcide, of course, particularly from a social frame of reference, you definitely can tap in and be part of the conversation. I know you're not too familiar with this situation, but we can center the conversation on, of course, Black androcide. And as you all know, you do not have to use the link. You do not have to cam up to be part of the conversation, and you can use a pseudonym. So I'd love to hear from you all. But this is, and as you all, I'm a bit somber today. Typically I'm very energetic, but this is just a very, very tough situation for me. I didn't know the brother personally, but I think, as you all know, as a Pan-Africanist, what I want for myself, I want for someone else. Watch it on TV. Appreciate you, brother. Appreciate you. Hopefully you can tap in and be part of the combo. And so what you want for yourself, you want for your brother or sister as well. And I do understand. Yes, tragic story. And I know what it's like to be in the academy and to really have individuals out for you. Like, I definitely know what that's like. And that's why it's important that, once again, you have a community, people that you can call, that you can talk to keep your head on straight, so that you're not going crazy, as they say. But yeah, this is a very, very tragic situation. And as I stated before, I understand, why he may have embellished, kind of put on in terms of his backstory. But, I do believe that, and of course we provided evidence via the New York Times articles, that part of the reason why he was being attacked was due to, of course, anti-Black racism. And so something to consider. And so, and one matter of fact, I can state, when I was in my doctoral program, I had one of my professors state, you write about and do research on a number of very controversial issues, or hot button issues, in terms of racism and power, etc. And they said, hey, you have to make sure that you dot every I and cross every T. I mean, I had a professor say, if you mispronounce one word, they would use it as a reason to discredit you, right? And so I just think that for those of us who are in the know, who are doing this type of work, Embellish means to. It's a fancy word for line. It's an example of, for example, I'm 6 foot tall, but if I was to say I'm 6'2", that would be a form of embellishing, right? Um, but yeah, what was embellished was his backstory. So he had claimed that he was nonverbal until age 11, and that he didn't learn how to read until age 18. But then when he finally learned how to read, he was able to have a meteoric rise through academia that culminated with him becoming a doctor, a PhD. Um, so that's the issue. Of course, they was able to do some research. He also stated that he grew up in the PJs, the projects and public housing, in the Greater London area. And so a lot of his backstory was found to have been embellished and just wasn't true. The issue was that, the Cambridge University actually promoted him as a up and coming star because of his incredible backstory, right? And so when they found that that wasn't the case, there were a number of individuals, particularly who were white and conservative, who used it as a way to, of course, attack him and argue that he was what many would call a DEI hire. So yeah, so there was a lot going on there. He then resigned about a week before what before he was deceased, um, basically stating that he no longer wanted to deal with the public scrutiny, right? I think many of us, were like, well, I don't give a French toast what anyone thinks. I'm gonna handle my beehive, right? Um, but he just decided to resign, and then of course, about a week later, he was found deceased in his South London apartment or home. So something to consider for family. Once again, as Wise to Dome TV stated, tragic story, 100% absolutely. But I think that's why it's important that you have community, you have people that you can talk to, so that we're not making permanent decisions based on a temporary situation. Just something, once again, to consider when we talk about the importance of community, the importance of mental health, the importance of being psychologically well, right? And we know this is holistic. But like I said before, there's a lot of pressure in the academy to produce, particularly at a elite institution like Cambridge, right? I mean, it's published, published, published. In fact, if you're in the academy, if you are faculty, you know the saying, it's publish or perish. And what we mean by that is that if you are a professor at an institution that is research intensive, the expectation that you publish, and if you don't publish, you will lose your job. It's that simple. It's literally publish or perish. So these are issues of concern, and so that may have played a role in why he was also accused of plagiarism, Big Ross, and so that may have been a reason why, due to um, the pressure to produce, we find this even in sports, but there are a lot of former athletes that say, the pressure to produce is what led me to take steroids, right? Not condoning the behavior, but this is something that has taken place. This will be a good subject to hear an Afropolitan that's located out there speak on. Got you. So what is Afropolitan? I haven't heard that term before. So if you could, put me on game, educate me on what the term Afropolitan means, that would be greatly appreciated. Yes, greatly appreciated. Afropolitan. So that an African person that lives in a metropolitan area, put me on game. So um, yeah, so extremely unfortunate situation. But I just think it's a lesson. And once again, as Paul Robeson stated, the battlefront is everywhere. There is no shelter rear. There is no shelter rear. This is why it's important that we are not only cognizant of the omnipresent role of course, anti-Black racism, but also the role of anti-Black misandry and, of course, Black androcide. Not a physical deletion, but a removal of Black man from, of course, a social space, a social sphere, right? And so this is something I think that we have to be cognizant of, particularly in professional spaces, right? This concept I talk about, this concept of John Henryism, where there's almost all the times a push by society to put Black men, particularly in the global, but you can even make this argument in the global South as well, into where they're doing work that is labor intensive, right, rather than intellectually intensive, right? So something to consider when we talk about, of course, Black androcide, and we know that individuals who work with their body rather than the head, or the hand, the mind, tend to have lower life expectancies, right? So something to consider their family. But let me look up this term Afropolitan, see what it means here. Afropolitan. Term constructed from the name African citizen. Okay. Describes a modern cosmopolitan identity for people of African descent, combining Africa and politics. Got you. Okay, very good. All right. So tap in, family. If not, we're gonna call it an evening. I definitely appreciate everyone for coming out and being part of the conversation. Until next time, family, y'all know what to do. Always bet on Black. Peace. Before you go, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Thank you for supporting the channel. And remember, here at Lumumba Speaks, we always bet on Black. Peace.